Hi, good morning. I'm from MSU Central. So I'm taking computer architecture for BCS program. Today I will present my first assignment, that is CPU architecture. Okay. So for the introduction, the computer central processing unit CPU is the portion of a computer that retrieve and execute instruction. The CPU is essentially the brain of a CAD system. It consists of arithmetic and logic unit (ALU), a control unit, and various registers. CPU is often simply referred to as a processor. The ALU perform arithmetic operation, logic operation, and related operation according to the program instruction. The control unit control all CPU operation, including ALU operation, the movement of the data within the CPU, and the exchange of the data and the control signal across external internal system bus. Registers are high-speed internal memory storage unit within the CPU. An internal clock synchronize all CPU components. The clock speed number of clock pass per second is measured in a megahertz or a million pass per second. And then the clock speed essentially measure how fast an instruction of the CPU process. So for the next one, we will go to history of AMD CPU. So it start with AMD 080 and AM29 that was released during 1975. It was a component used to create a 4-bit modular processor. And then in the IBM agreement in 1982, AMD began making licensed identical clone of Intel 8086 processor as a result of the deal. Next, AMD created AMD 2900 32-bit RISC processor. It is based on Berkeley RISC architecture version. And then AMD AM2X6. Going to the 3X6 is a legal battle with Intel. It was released on 1985. And then the AM4X6 and AM5X6, the final clone. So it was the last Intel processor that AMD produced, and it was released in 1994. K5 is a AMD first 86 processor. AMD debuted their first 86 processor in 1996, and then the K6, the AMD next gen processor. And then the AMD 6.3 integration of L2 cache, still with the same series K6 2, 3 plus, and then the K7 and K75, because the industry learned that the L2 cache performance was causing the CPU performance to suffer. And then the K7 AMD Duran, K7 Athlon Palomino, still on the K7, the Athlon Thoroughbred and Button, until the K7 Athlon Totten Endurance, and then the AMD Jot, the APU processor. In 2003, AMD purchased National Semiconductor Job CPU series to expand law and product option. And then in 2004, AMD K7 first Sempron. And then Athlon 64 K8, Athlon 64 Sledgehammer, Clawhammer, and Newcastle. Next, AMD K8 gradual improvement. So AMD unveiled its new 19 nm transistor processor in 2004, allowing the company to boost the speed of Athlon 64 CPU with lowering power consumption. And then the Athlon 64 Manchester, Venice, San Diego, Orleans, and Lima. the KX Sempron, KX Athlon 64x2, until K10 quad-core Phenom, and then the AMD Phenom, and then start the series of the K10 Athlon Sempron Phenom Fusilano, and then the AMD Bobcat. AMD unveiled a Bobcat architecture in 2011 to compete with Intel's Atom and ARM low power microprocessor. AMD Bulldozer Zambezi, Pile Driver Trinity Richland, AMD Pile Driver Vishera, and then on the 2014 the AMD Steamroller GCN APU, AMD Jaguar to release the outdated Bobcat core excavator, the end of the bulldozer, and then lastly the Ryzen AMD Bond. So AMD first micro op cache which can hold recently used instruction and improve speed while eliminate pipeline bottleneck. Ryzen 7 CPU were quickly followed by Ryzen 5 processor, which were made from partially faulty Ryzen 7 cores. Ryzen 5 is a available quad and has a core configuration with clock rate comparable to the Ryzen 7. So, first comparison is AMD Ryzen 9 5950X. So its physical characteristic, it is high-end Vermeer series desktop, CPU with 16 core and SMT. It has 32 thread, which is the same fastest 16 core CPU with TDP of 1051. On a single core, the Ryzen 9 5950X run at 3.4 GHz base clock and reach 4.9 GHz in turbo mode when all 16 cores are loaded. However, speed of up to 4.5 GHz are still conceivable. AMD Ryzen 9 5950X features is each core has access to the whole L3 cache 32 MB. The CCX module are coupled to one another via the same I/O die as shown in the Zen 2 according to the AMD. The fabric can reach clock rate up to 2 GHz, allowing the RAM clock of 4000 MHz without sacrificing performance. Excel at simultaneous streaming, ideal for content creator because in addition to gaming, the Vermeer processing core are manufactured using the TSMS7 technology. So the next one is Intel CPU. So the history of Intel CPU began at the 4004, which was released in 1971, the first microprocessor for Intel. And then the 8008080, the 4004 helped Intel establish a name in microprocessor, and Intel responded by introducing a new range of 8-bit CPUs. It is in 1972, and then followed by 1974 and 1975, which is the 8085. So for 8086, the beginning of 86, the 8086 was Intel's first 16-bit processor, which helped to significantly improve performance over previous design. And then next, 0186, 80286, more memory, more performance. IAPX 432, first attempt to move away from 86 platform. And then the first RISC I960, and then the 86 turned to 30-bit 80386, and then it proceeded to i860, a revolutionary CPU 80486 integrating the FPU. P5 is the first Pentium, and then P6 the Pentium Pro, P6 Pentium 2, 3 and the rest of the 1 GHz, P5 and P6 Celeron and Xeon. The core is same as the Pentium 2 and 3 but with different level of cache. And then start with NetBurst, Pentium 4 Willamette and Northwood, P6 Pentium M, NetBurst Prescott, NetBurst Pentium D, Bonner, Silvertone and Diamondville, and lastly the Nehalem, the first Core i7. So this is the Intel Core i9 10980XE. So the physical character is the Intel Core i9 10980XE 3 GHz with 18 core LGA 2066 processor, has a base clock speed of 3.0 GHz, has 18 cores and 36 threads, 24.75 MB of cache memory, and 48 PCIe lanes in the LGA 2066 socket. The processor 18 core allows it to run numerous programs at the same time without slowing down the system, while the 36 threads allow a single CPU core to pass through or process a basic order sequence of instructions. It supports up to 256 GB of DDR4 memory running at 293 MHz. So the Intel's Core i9 1080XE features is the features such as Intel Deep Learning Boost, Intel Optane memory support, Intel Hyper-Threading technology, Intel Virtualization technology, Intel Virtualization technology for directed I/O. It's compatible with X299 chipset based motherboard. The maximum turbo frequency this processor can achieve with Intel Turbo Boost 2.0 technology is 4.6, can be further enhanced to 4.8 GHz with Intel Turbo Boost 3.0 technology. So that's all for the two type of the CPU from me. So for the conclusion, the CPU in a computer system with its numerous components for processing and executing instruction, computer processor play a critical function. Many processors such as the Intel Pentium 4, Intel Core i7, Core i5, Core i3, AMD Phenom 2 X3, AMD Athlon 2 X4 and other are available to boost processing power of CPU. Intel and AMD are the leading CPU manufacturer, offering a wide selection of processors at various pricing options. In order to buy a suitable processor for computer PC, one must consider the clock speed, cache capacity and core. So in my opinion, the Intel Core i7 or AMD Phenom 2 X4 processor, which are more expensive but provide superior performance, should be chosen. That's all. Thank you from me.